This video is made possible by the free-to-play action game Crossout. Check out the game through the link in the description below, and you can start with 3 extra weapons or a vehicle cabin just for registering. While landmines have existed as a concept as early as the 13th century, when they were used by the Chinese to repel Mongol invasions, it's Imperial Germany that is credited with making the advances that led to modern landmines as we understand them. Utilized extensively during World War I by the Germans, the weapons proved to be so effective that they were rapidly copied and deployed by all the major superpowers involved in the conflict. When Hitler assumed power of Germany in 1933, landmine technology was once again pushed to the forefront of military research, and this brings us to the topic of today. Variously called the Shrapnel Mine 35, Shrapnel Mine 35, Splinter Mine, or Bouncing Betty, the S-Mine, as it was officially dubbed in Allied memos, was a deceptively simplistic weapon that one Lieutenant Colonel C.E.E. Sloan dubbed the most feared device encountered by Allied troops in the war. Physically, the mine resembled a small cylinder inside of which was either powdered or poured TNT. On top of each mine was a fuse which, when sprung, caused the explosive inside to detonate. The thing that set the S-Mine apart from similar devices was that rather than exploding immediately, it was designed to implode around 4 seconds after being tripped. Another key distinguishing feature of the S-Mine, and the one that made it so lethally effective, is that instead of detonating in the ground, its fuse was designed to launch the body of the mine about 3 feet into the air, at which point it would violently explode. To maximize lethality, the body of the S-Mine was filled with hundreds of steel ball bearings that would be launched outwards at high speeds. The capacity for destruction of the S-Mine cannot be understated here, and while the exact lethal range of the mine isn't clear, a 1943 US Army field manual claims that it could inflict casualties as far away as 460 feet from the point of detonation. That said, perhaps due to their hastily constructed nature, the German military produced nearly 2 million of these things during World War II alone, the quality of the mine varied dramatically. As a result, more often than not, the mine would simply severely maim rather than outright kill. This is doubly terrifying in a weapon that was explicitly designed to detonate at testicle height, and in fact, it's for this exact reason that British soldiers sometimes referred to the S-Mine as the De-Bollocker, bollock being slang for testicles. Other similar nicknames adopted by the Allies for the device included the Bouncing Bitch, or more succinctly, the Castrator. However, as noted, the most common name among Allied soldiers for the mine was the Bouncing Betty, a name originally coined by American troops. Incidentally, due to the fact that these mines didn't detonate until they were a few feet in the air and launched down shrapnel at a mostly horizontal angle, injury from S-mines could sometimes be avoided by immediately laying down once the mine was triggered. In any event, the first known Allied encounter with the S-mine occurred during the Tsar Offensive in 1939, shortly after the start of World War II. German forces mined the region so heavily that a French offensive, apparently that's a thing, into German territory was halted in its tracks. Shocker. Said soldiers reported the mine's existence and effectiveness to their superiors, along with their own personal nickname for it, the Silent Soldier. As this mine was developed during the Third Reich, records about its origins are understandably hard to come by, but we do know that it was developed sometime in 1935, hence Shrapnel Mine 35. Throughout the war, Nazi engineers continued to make improvements to the already deadly device, culminating in the creation of a glass version of the mine, unimaginatively dubbed the Glass Mine 43. That was developed in, you guessed it, 1943. Along with being largely undetectable to mine detectors of the time, the glass mine carried an increased risk of infection, partially thanks to the fact that the glass shrapnel was harder for X-rays to detect, making operating on a person injured by it that much more difficult. Beyond German forces planting the S-mines like grass seed pretty much everywhere they thought Allied soldiers might come near, they also cleverly peppered S-mines around anti-tank and anti-vehicle mines so that soldiers inside of the vehicles disabled by them would either be killed by the S-mines when exiting the ruined vehicle or have to stay put. Due to the extreme density of these mines in certain regions, even when particular Allied troops had the ability to detect the mines, which was a big if considering mine detection equipment was in short supply throughout throughout the war, proceeding through mines land was exceptionally difficult and slow going. At times, this became so bad that progress into German-held territory, it just stopped entirely. As an example of how saturated some areas were with mines, after D-Day, and we're going to get into what the D in D-Day stands for in a moment, Allies found and removed 15,000 unexploded mines from the dunes around Popperville alone. Further, after World War II, Allied forces conscripted some 49,000 German POWs to remove as many mines as they could throughout Western Europe. Yet even with this massive amount of manpower and meticulously kept Nazi maps of where the mines were planted, there are still areas today, particularly in North Africa and certain parts of Eastern Europe, that are considered unsafe to travel on because there may still be some functional, undetected World War II era mines located there. As you can probably guess, given the Bouncing Betty's brutal effectiveness, the design of the mine was quickly reverse engineered and derivatives were extensively created by numerous countries. However, due to the fact that the devices cause such horrific, debilitating injuries, and a buried, forgotten mine is just as dangerous to your own people as to your enemies, few countries today still use mines of any design in combat. Notable exceptions to this include Russia and the People's Republic of China. Incidentally, beyond being an extremely deadly mine, the shrapnel mine 35 also gave birth to a common myth about landmines, and that's that such mines only detonate when the person who set it off steps off the trigger. This is a myth that became widespread during the war and likely originated due to the fact that the S-mine was made to detonate a few seconds after being triggered, making it appear to not go off until the person stepped away. In reality, the mine was designed to detonate whenever a weight of more than 15 pounds hit the ground anywhere near it. Now, mines and war, they're not so much fun in real life, but in virtual worlds, they're much more enjoyable, and that brings us to today's sponsor, Crossout. The best way for me to show you this game, and why you should definitely download it for free, is for me to show you some gameplay, so let's head over to the computer.
Hey everybody, welcome to Crossout. This is a game where you get to design your own vehicle and go smash things up. You can really change this however you want. Let's just swap these guys out with some rockets. These I have had a lot of trouble with. Let's just put 4 of these guys on, or 6 of these guys on. Let's just test drive, and no loading, it'll just immediately should drive this guy out. And there's this, like, I can screw with this ball over here if I want to. It'd be good if I actually hit it. I bet if I launch my cannon, it's going to be pretty devastating. All right, so I usually play this one. The idea is that we've got to defend this thing from these big tank things that come. Wow, these guys have some crazy vehicles. See, I really struggle to control these with these jet boosters. I much prefer the Mars rover. Look, the leader is close. So this is that Leviathan. Ah, oh, God, there he is. Yeah, no, that wasn't a good time, was it? Let's return. What the hell am I supposed to beat that? So join us on the battlefield for free. There's a link in the description below. You can get 3 extra weapons or a vehicle cabin just for registering. It's the best way you can support what we're doing here at TodayIFoundOut, so I'd really appreciate it. Link below. It's a lot of fun. Just get started today.
So that's Crossout. Join us on the battlefield for free using the link in the description below. And going through that link gets you a free starter set with 3 extra weapons or a vehicle cabin. And let's get into those bonus facts. The Battle of Normandy, also known as D-Day, started on June 6, 1944, and was the beginning of the major invasion of German-occupied Western Europe during World War II. But why was it called D-Day? You first might be inclined to think that the abbreviation is similar to V-Day, Victory Day. Indeed, one commonly touted explanation given for the meaning of the D in D-Day is that it stands for Designated Day. Others claim that it stands for Decision Day or Debarkation Day, or some even claim that it stands for Deliverance Day. Even General Dwight Eisenhower, or at least his assistant, weighed in when Eisenhower received a letter asking for an explanation of the meaning of D-Day. His executive assistant wrote back stating D-Day was a shortened version of Departed Day. Given Eisenhower helped plan it, that should mean case closed, right? Well, it turns out most historians think not. And indeed, the evidence at hand doesn't seem to support Eisenhower's, or perhaps just his assistant's, claim. Hints of the true meaning can be found long before World War II in a US Army field order dated the 7th of September 1918. The First Army will attack at H hour on D-Day with the object of forcing the evacuation of the St. Michal salient. In that context, and with numerous combat operations that followed over the years, D-Day referred to the day on which a combat attack would occur, with H hour likewise referring to the hour when an attack is scheduled to happen. Thus, the D is just a placeholder or variable for the actual date, and probably originally was meant to stand for date or day, if anything, if the associated H hour is any indication. The use of D-Day allows military personnel to easily plan for a combat mission ahead of time without knowing the exact date that it will occur. Given that planning for the most famous of all D-Days in June of 1944 started way back in 1943, and that due to factors like optimal tides, only a few days in a given month were suitable for the launch of the invasion, trying to fix a firm date in the planning process was pointless, even close to the time of the attack. In fact, the original date was June the 5th, but bad weather at the last minute forced a day delay. By simply assigning the attack to occur on D-Day, it solved the issue and had the side benefit of keeping the date of the attack a secret as long as possible, just one of the many methods of deception the military employed to try and confuse the German brass with regards to the pending invasion. As for handling the pre-D-Day preparations and the plan for after, adding a plus or minus sign and a number after the D was used. For example, D-1 would indicate the day before the operation occurring, while D+3 would mean 3 days after the operation. In this way, the plans could be easily overlaid onto a calendar when the military leadership decided on the day of the attack. If the day needed to be switched at the last minute, it was then also easy enough to calibrate the plan to the new date. As alluded to, the D-Day that occurred on June 6, 1944 was not the only D-Day during World War II, and it certainly was not the last, as this method for planning of military operations continues to this day. Of course, because the D-Day at the Battle of Normandy was and continues to be the most famous of all given that designation, it seems unlikely in the foreseeable future that it will be usurped in people's minds when someone mentions D-Day, despite the military continuing to occasionally use this designation. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out our sponsor Crossout. There's a link below. Great free way to support this channel. And as always, I'll see you next time.